الأنبياء والمرسلين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المكرمين المنتجبين لا سيما بقية الله في الأراضين روحي وأرواح العالمين لتراب مقدمه الفداء ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. For the hastening and the return of our Imam, please recite the salawat. The Ahlul Bayt, the path to salvation. This is the theme of these talks these nights. And as we introduced the topic last night, we said that we all, alhamdulillah, are hopefully followers of the Ahlul Bayt. At least we are theologically Shia, meaning that we believe that the Ahlul Bayt are representatives of the divine, in the sense that, at the very least, they are people that must be obeyed by us. We as believers, as Muslimin, have got to be obedient to the Ahlul Bayt. Whatever the Imam says, we've got to obey. We don't say, well, where'd you get that from? We don't say, well, what's the reason behind that? You don't ask for explanation. Not that it's wrong to ask for an explanation, but it's wrong not to be obedient. If your obedience and following is dependent on your understanding of the reasoning why he is saying it, and then that's not really obedience. You're not really following him. If you think that the logic makes sense, then you're going to be following it. Otherwise, like, I don't think we should do that. We're not going to do that. That's not obedience. We need to listen to and obey the Imams. If the Imam says, in this case, your prayer is 2 rak'ah, then the prayer is 2 rak'ah. You don't ask why. It's okay to ask why, but not that the obedience is dependent on that. No, you listen to it. That's the bare minimum for a person to be considered Shia, theologically. If you don't have that understanding, then you wouldn't be considered Shia, theologically again. Because there's various versions of Shias. We have political Shias in history. Political Shias are people who didn't really have the understanding that whatever the Imam says is right, and they need to obey it. They believe that out of the various options they had, in terms of Khilafah, the best option were the Ahlul Bayt. And they fought even for the government of the Ahlul Bayt. You have political Shias. Many believe that the Shias you had in Kufa, or at least some of the Shias in Kufa, that fought for, or at least started to fight for, the government of Imam al-Hussein, or those who fought alongside Amir al-Mu'mineen for his government, they were political Shias. They hadn't reached the understanding that whatever Amir al-Mu'mineen says is right, but out of the various options, they preferred Amir al-Mu'mineen as their ruler, as their governor, as opposed to the other options. So to be a theological Shia, that's the bare minimum you need to have. But having a correct understanding or a better understanding of who the Ahlul Bayt are is key in learning how the Ahlul Bayt are the path to our salvation. The Ahlul Bayt are most definitely the path to salvation, but we need to develop that understanding so that we can truly realize that and start taking practical steps towards that, inshallah. So the first step we said is understanding who the Ahlul Bayt are. And we introduced the idea with some questions that we raised, that being a theological Shia, there's a bare minimum, but then you have a variety of different views with regards to who the Ahlul Bayt are. You have one view that believes the Ahlul Bayt are ulama abrar, very similar to the Sunni view. Sunnis view Imam al-Sadiq salamullah alayhi as being an alim and being righteous and pious. Most Ahlul Sunnah, those who know the Imam, they have that view. There was a very, very small and tiny fraction of the population that were referred to as Nasibis that hated the Ahlul Bayt. They were very, very small in number. Okay, the Umayyads particularly, and those who followed the Umayyad ideology, but they were very small in number. They believed the Ahlul Bayt were ulama, they were scholars, and they were pious. but we don't have to listen to what they had to say. Imam al-Sadiq says something, Abu Hanifa says something different. They were both scholars. I like Abu Hanifa's view. I want to follow Malik ibn Anas. I want to follow Ahmad ibn Hanbal. They're all ulama, they're all pious. I choose this one. Similar to the view we have Shias towards our ulama. We don't view our ulama as being people that whatever they say is right, although we do taqleed. In doing taqleed, what we say is that yes, they could be wrong in their judgment of what the rule is. They do their best to try to figure out what the ruling is. They go through the verses, through the ahadith, try to find out what most accurately, based on their understanding, is the ruling, what God has wanted us to do. But they can make mistakes. They can have a wrong judgment. We'll still follow that because that's the best thing we can do. We're not experts. When we go to the doctor, we're not sure if the view of the doctor is actually going to get us any better or not. Maybe we're going to take that medication and we're going to get worse. There's no guarantee. It's not 100%. You may go through that surgery and die instead. Okay. But what do? You don't say, okay, well, because of that possibility, I'm just going to leave it. Say, this is the best option I have. This is an expert. His judgment is that I go through this surgery and it may be a wrong judgment. You go through that. But we don't believe that whatever the ulama say is necessarily correct. They may make mistakes, and they do make mistakes. When you have 5 different views on a matter, you know that not all 5 are going to be accurate. That's pretty basic or common sense, But we follow that. That's taqleed. We're supposed to. That has its own reasoning. We've gone over that before. Sunnis view the Ahlul Bayt as such. Ulama, abrar, just like any other alim that they had at their time. Malik ibn Anas, and so on and so forth. For Shias, if you want to be a Shia, you have to believe that whatever they say is right with regards to religion. If they tell you salat is done in this particular way, this is how you make this tahir, or the other thing is najis, then you take that as correct. You don't ask any questions. Alright, there are Shias that accept that, but beyond that, there are simply ulama, abrar, scholars that are pious and righteous. That's pretty much it. They may step up the righteousness of the Ahlul Bayt and move up to isma, some form of isma, infallibility, which is infallibility in their judgment of what the rule is, what God wants us to do, the infallibility in practicing that in the wajibat and muharramat, but beyond that, even infallibility is in question for some Shias, some scholars even. Not just ordinary people. Scholars even have these various opinions, various views. So to be a Shia means, as we said, and we're repeating this, to believe that the Imams are people assigned by God to be our leaders, and whatever they say with regards to religion is something we need to obey, and whatever they say is correct. But beyond that, what are we supposed to believe in? Are we actually supposed to believe that our sustenance goes through the medium of the Ahlul Bayt? Are we supposed to believe that if we are receiving sustenance today, as Muslims, inshallah, we believe that sustenance comes from God? Okay, inshallah. I hope. Because a lot of times that belief seems to be not quite there. Okay, we think that a lot of other sources are the sources of my income and my sustenance. I don't see God as being the one who's responsible for my sustenance. God being the one that gives me and provides for me. As Muslims, we're supposed to have that view. God provides. Okay. Are we also supposed to believe that the Ahlul Bayt have something to do with that, or no? We're not supposed to believe in that. These are two various views amongst Shia. There are views that exist amongst Shias that the Ahlul Bayt have everything to do with every bit of sustenance I receive, it goes through the medium of the Ahlul Bayt. Any blessing we receive is through the Ahlul Bayt. It comes from the divine, but it goes through the Ahlul Bayt and we receive it at the end here. Okay. Are we supposed to believe that, or is that ghulub? Some of the ulama have said this is ghulub. If you believe in this, then you're exaggerating about the Ahlul Bayt. You're considering them to be divine. You're considering them to be deities. And this is exaggeration. This is ghulub. This is believing in multiple gods. This is polytheism. This is shirk. Others believe, no, it's faith. And other views that we explained in the previous session. So what we said we want to do is we need to have a correct understanding of the Ahlul Bayt. What I want to do today is build a foundation, brothers and sisters. I could come here and tell you, look, here's this hadith, and this hadith suggests that the Ahlul Bayt are the ones that provide you the sustenance independent of God. You know, this notion that some of us even sort of explicitly say. It's something, sounds a bit funny. First you ask God, okay? If it doesn't work, who do you go to? You go to Imam Hussein, okay? And if that doesn't work, then you go to Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, okay? And he's the one that really has the keys, okay? So is this a correct notion or is it not? You know, this is, as funny as it may sound, some people really, it seems like they have that view deep down inside, like, you know, he's really the one that can do things. If you want it to work, you got to go to him. He pulls it off. So we could go over and say, okay, there's this hadith that suggests something like that, or there's this hadith that suggests that the Ahlul Bayt are the means through which God provides, or there's this hadith that says that if you believe such and such, then you're a ghali. And we can move on. What I want to do is to get, or to attract our attention, or draw our attention to the idea of thinking about reasoning, arguments, the basis of the argument, why we would accept one over the other. I've had this conversation with this community before. It's important for us to think and look at why we accept something or we reject it. Otherwise, someone comes up here and gives a really spiced up speech about something and we're like, okay, you know, that's it. You start hearing not a hateries for it. Okay. And you may hear the opposite the following day or the following week or the following month or the following year. Again, spiced up, and another not a hatery goes to that. Okay. You need to understand, we need to understand why. Okay. It's important that we do that. There is a methodology that ulama use. We got to think about this. How do we go about and look at what we have in our heritage, the verses of the Holy Quran, in hadith, the words of the ulama? How do we make use of that, put it together and draw conclusions? If someone comes to us in one lecture and tells us, Ziyara Jami'ah is great, Allama Tabatabai said this about it, and so on and so forth, and then you look at Ziyara Jami'ah Kabira and it says, وَإِيَابُ الْخَلْقِ إِلَيْكُمْ وَحِسَابُهُ عَلَيْكُمْ, that the return of the khalq, of the creation, is to you. And وَحِسَابُهُمْ عَلَيْكُمْ, the one that is going to be taking care of judgment is, in a sense, not God, but rather the Ahlul Bayt. And they stress on that. It's going to be the Ahlul Bayt that are going to take care of your case on the day of judgment, not God. Someone comes along and tells you something like that. Next week, or the following month, or the following year, you receive information that this marja is saying Ziyara Jami'ah Kabira is not even founded. It's weak. What do you do with that? How do you deal with that matter? Is it that you look at the chain of transmitters and you say, okay, the people who are narrating this hadith are weak, and so it's not acceptable? Or do you say, well, this scholar said, Allama Tabatabai, oh my God, he's this, he's that, he's accepting this. How do you go about and deal with this? These are becoming very serious issues for us. I don't know if this community is dealing with these issues currently or not, but if you're not right now, you will be dealing with these issues. You'll have someone that'll come and tell you something about the Ahlul Bayt, their rank, their status with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what they can do, what you should do towards them. You should walk on hot coal because Abu Abdullah al-Husayn salamullah alayh gave his life. You can do whatever to show your salutation to Imam al-Husayn. Whatever. Bleed, walk on hot fire, do this, do that, whatever. It doesn't matter. Anything that would be otherwise haram, when it comes to Imam al-Husayn, it's mubah, it's okay. They'll come and tell you that. How do we go about and deal with these issues? Methodology is important, and obviously this isn't something that we're going to be able to go over in these sessions. It's a very intense academic issue and matter. It requires a lot of reading, it requires a lot of thinking. I want to give you some very general guidelines to think about and to give you maybe a direction in your readings and your thoughts, inshallah. The first thing I want to say about that is we have a very, in a sense, scientific methodology of going about and verifying information. We have a very strong, developed methodology in going about and verifying information in our religion. It's been developing for centuries, brothers and sisters. A lot of us are less familiar or sometimes completely unaware of this. Some of those who start reading into religion, they think that, okay, scholars have just read hadith and translated those ahadith, not really put much thought into verifying the information, developing opinion scientifically, as some call it. And so we're going to be inventing that will. It's not there in Shia scholarship. It's not there in Islamic scholarship. We're going to be doing that. Some of the wording that I find in Western academics, or Muslim Western academic, or Western Muslim academics, sounds like that. They present that as though, there's really not much there that has been developed. No, this methodology has been developing for centuries. Ulama have spent days, weeks, and months, and years, their entire lives, on developing this methodology. There's a very strong scientific methodology in developing opinion and understanding with regards to religion. We should make note of that, and if we're not aware of it, go try to read into it. The most developed form of it that ulama have had throughout time, but you're seeing some, at least I can say, in my understanding, we have maybe more of them today that have this type of view, although we have other opinions and other views amongst our scholars as well, is especially when it comes to theology. There's a difference between theology and matters of fiqh, matters of practice. Is it wajib to wash my face twice or once, or do I go from top to bottom or bottom to top? How do I develop that opinion to make sure that on the day of judgment I wouldn't have to answer to the angels as to why I prayed inappropriately? What is going to be proof? What is going to be saving my neck on the day of judgment? You have that argument, that those sets or those types of argument and that methodology there in fiqh. And you have a methodology when it comes to history, when it comes to theology, when it comes to these various other disciplines. The methodology that is accepted and is strongly founded in our theology, in tafsir, in history, is what some call tajmi'ul qara'in, or in other words, adding or putting all the various clues you have together and drawing conclusions. Not looking at just one particular clue or one argument, one reasoning, and saying this is it. Sometimes the approach that is taken is this way. I'll give you a couple of examples. One example which I've already introduced. People have said, look, Ziyara Jama'a Kabira, don't read it. Forget about the content of it. Why? Because we have a discipline called Rijal. Okay, now this becomes a key word, a very important term. There's a study of Rijal, and scholars of Rijal have said this particular individual in the isnad or the chain of transmitters of this hadith is weak. Okay, that's it. Throw it away, out the window. Otherwise, you have no clue what Rijal is. This is an approach that is sometimes taken. I remember having a conversation with someone. People who look into this, it becomes very intriguing. You start, the study of Rijal is a study of the transmitters. You go over the ahadith and all the clues we have with regards to particular transmitters. They start picking up a book called Rijal al-Kashi, and they look through the ahadith you have about Zurara ibn A'yan, one of our transmitters, and they're like, Ulama said that you take the ahadith from Zurara, but you look at the ahadith here in Rijal al-Kashi about Zurara, some of them are cursing Zurara. How can you rely on someone that the Imams have cursed? You have a number of hadith that speak negatively of Zurara ibn A'yan. So it starts becoming very interesting. Okay, Zurara is like this. Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman, I thought the Sheikh said he's a really good guy. You go to Rijal al-Kashi, they say he's this, that, the other. You hear something about... Recite a salawat, please. Sahl ibn Ziyad, for example, another transmitter of hadith. We have thousands of hadith from this particular individual. And you go to Rijal, like, oh my God, Najashi, one of the other scholars we have in Rijal, one of the four main books of Rijal, says this person is da'if. Like, oh my God, what do we do with this? So it becomes very interesting, and as soon as you mention a hadith or whatever, like, let me look at the chain of transmitters here. And they check the chain, and they're like, okay, sorry, this guy is not known, this guy is da'if. I know what I'm talking about, you don't know what you're talking about, end of story, end of discussion. You're not speaking logic here. This is a very, very narrow approach towards our sources, towards our ahadith, towards our heritage. This is one example of how, instead of looking at all the clues that are available to us and judging the accuracy of a hadith, judging the understanding that is put forth in a hadith, we just look at one thing and that's it. Another example of this, which is of course very different, but I would classify it as the same, is this concept of shirk. Alright. You have tawheed in Islam. We all say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Okay. We all believe there's no God but God. With a capital G. There's only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Any other deity is rejected. Tawheed. Okay. A very narrow understanding of tawheed, which is wrong, by the way, is developed, and that narrow and wrong understanding of tawheed becomes the factor that we judge everything else in Islam based on. That's it. We've developed this understanding. The Quran says, وَمَا تَشَاءُونَ إِلَّا أَن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ. Even your will is dependent on God. You don't will unless God wills. God's will is there for everything. Anything else is shirk. God says no one else has any powers. If you rely on anyone else, if you call upon anyone else, then your call is in vain. It won't work. This is it. This is tawheed. Anything other than that is shirk. So in Ziyarah Jama'a Kabira, for example, again at the end, the dua says this, alright? This is not, or the ziyarah as we call it. The ziyarah says, Ya wali Allah, inna bayni wa bayna Allah azza wa jal dhunuban la ya'ti alayha illa ridhakum. I have sins between me and God. How can I overcome this problem? How do I get rid of these sins? It's already done. I've already committed them. How do I resolve that problem of mine? Where do I run? In this ziyarah, we ask the Imam, we address the Imam directly. We say, Ya wali Allah, you are the wali of Allah. There's sins between me and God. But the only solution to it is ridhakum. Your pleasure, you being pleased, your ridha with me. If you're pleased with me, God will forgive them. Like, oh, you're calling the Imam directly? The Quran said, you don't call anyone except for God. This is shirk. Dua tawassul, similarly, these are real examples. Again, I don't know if this community is dealing with them right now or not. Dua tawassul. One thing that is heard is this, oh, you guys have not done the research. When you do the research, this dua is actually by ulama. It's not from the Ahlul Bayt, or it's not proven to be from the Ahlul Bayt. So scrap it. Why do you even do this? It's not from the Imams. It's not even said. That, again, that very narrow understanding of everything. Judging everything based on, oh, you got to have a chain of transmitters to the Imam. Otherwise, it's haram, brother. You don't do this. Well, let's look at other clues. Let's look at other hadith. Let's look at everything, have the full picture, and then make a judgment. Does this fit in that holistic approach? Or does it not? There are certain things that just don't fit. When you put the whole puzzle together, you have that framework. This doesn't fit in there. No, get rid of this. This is wrong. This is unacceptable. But there's various other things that fit in. You have to find the place. You have to find where it fits. But there is room for it. It is founded. It may not have a chain of transmitters that you're looking for, but the various clues put together are going to say to us and give us the understanding that, no, this is from Islam. Or sometimes we could say it's possibly from Islam. You don't tell me that this is wrong. You got to provide that argument, and I'll explain that further, inshallah. Another thing with regards to dua tawassul, again, we're using this as an example. So, oh, you're addressing the Imam directly. There's a problem with that. And then people start asking, okay, the Imams haven't said this. Do we have any dua, any hadith that people have addressed the Imams directly, or the Imams have told us to address the Imams directly? I've been faced with this question plenty of times. Can you give me one dua that the Imam has taught us to address the Imams directly? And then when you give them Ziyarah Jama'a, for example, they say, oh, that doesn't have a correct chain of transmitters whenever they studied Rijal. if they even really know what that is. Another dua, please. Something that's solid. The question I usually ask is, do you need the imam to tell you every little detail? Or they've given you guidelines, and based on that you can determine whether this particular detail is fitting in the bigger picture or not? Do you need the imams to have driven a car to say it's okay to drive a car? Or you say you go back to the Stone Age, put aside technology, live like the Amish. Because the Prophet didn't have anything except for a camel or a horse or a mule or something. There's general guidelines that have been given. Look at it holistically. Don't be narrow-minded. Don't pick out Rijal and say we're going to judge everything with Rijal. Not because we're going to face problems. See, this is also, I'm not sure how much of this I'm able to get across to brothers and sisters. This is very important. I'm trying to get some of it at least across, and hopefully God gives me the tawfiq to do so. I'll put it out very briefly. Whoever's interested, we can follow up with a discussion afterwards. Look, if you want to look at Rijal or look at everything with chain of transmitters, your very discussion of Rijal is not going to be founded. I'll give you one of the ulama who has explicitly said this. There's a science, you've already become familiar with it to an extent. I've mentioned the name a couple of times. Rijal, the study of the transmitters of hadith. Which ones are reliable, which ones are not. One of the students of Ayatollah Khou'i, who is alive, he's Afghan, may Allah bless him and give him a long life, he's in Kabul. Ayatollah Asif Muhsini Qandahari, as if I remember his full name correctly. He has a book, Buhuthun fi Ilm al-Rijal. And in that book, he raises this question, and he says, nobody has been able to give me a solid answer on this. And I'm really struggling with this, and whoever gives me an answer, I'll give them whatever reward I can. Okay, I will reward them to the best of my ability. Please resolve this issue. Not that he's incapable, but this is a very serious question that is posed. And the question is this. The study of Rijal relies on 4 major books, the most important of which is the book that is the writing or the compilation of the author An-Najashi in the 5th century. He passed away, if I remember correctly, in 460, around that time at least. He has a book that he goes over transmitters. But in that book, Najashi says, for example, Zurara ibn A'yan in the 2nd century is a reliable transmitter of hadith. There's a 200-year gap there. How did Najashi figure out that Zurara is reliable? What's his chain of transmitters? He doesn't tell us what his chain of transmitters are. He just says that Zurara is reliable. In Rijal, we're taught that, okay, that's great, we take that, But that itself, what's that based off of? That type of hadith is called mursal. It will be dha'if in fiqh. How do we rely on that in our Rijal? If you want to look at chain of transmitters and say, we need to nitpick on every single individual in that chain of transmission to see if they're reliable, then you're going to have a serious dilemma, because your Rijal is based on transmissions without transmitters for you to verify. This is not the only angle to look at everything, the only way, the only method of verifying information. Okay? So these examples, the point we're trying to make here is to realize that there's a very scientific method of developing correct understandings with regards to the religion. In our case, in our discussion with regards to the Ahlul Bayt, who are the Ahlul Bayt? We want to develop the ma'rifah of the Ahlul Bayt. How do we verify that information? It's important to know that that discipline is there. It's important to know that there's ways of doing that. It's important to know that whatever we hear is not necessarily accurate. We've got to know that there is a method that is going to be able to verify that information. And the way to do that is not to be narrow-minded, but to have a holistic approach, putting together all the clues and then drawing conclusions. Recite a salawat, please. One of those clues, which we're going to be starting our discussion with, is tawheed, a correct understanding of tawheed. I want to go over this, and hopefully we'll be able to do this leg of the discussion in this session and finish it, inshallah. What should be our understanding of tawheed? So when they come to us and they say this is shirk or the other is shirk, when they come and tell us that praying on the turba is shirk, tawassul to the Ahlul Bayt is shirk, this is shirk, addressing the Imam is shirk, dua tawassul is shirk, dua al-faraj. You've read Ilahi Adhum al-Bala, right? Inshallah, in this community you guys read it, right? There's some community, there's some Shia communities that don't recite that dua. You know that, right? There are Shia communities, they say that you shouldn't be reciting Ilahi Adhum al-Bala. Why? Because you say, Ya Muhammadu, Ya Ali, ikfiyani fa innakuma kafiyan, wansurani fa innakuma nasiran. Say that's outrageous. That's shirk. We have to have a correct understanding of tawheed in order to be able to verify that. If we don't have a correct understanding of tawheed, we're not going to be able to tell, is this really shirk or is it not shirk? What is tawheed? What does monotheism tell us? Monotheism. There's one deity. There's one God. And only one God. There's only one God. La ilaha illallah. What does it mean when you say La ilaha illallah? There's only one God. It's very important that we have that understanding. A correct understanding of La ilaha illallah. There are various wrong understandings with regards to tawheed. Some of them, on one end of the spectrum, we've mentioned over these years that we've visited this community. I addressed the matter earlier in this session as well. If anyone believes that the source of my sustenance is anyone other than God, that's shirk. If you think that God isn't the one that's supporting you, it's someone else, which is subconsciously something that most of us believe in, unfortunately. That's why we're told we have shirkul khafi. Okay? وَمَا آمَنَ أَكْثَرُهُمْ إِلَّا وَهُمْ مُشْرِكُونَ. Right? The verse of the Holy Quran. Most of those who believe have shirk. But this is not outward shirk. It's not explicit shirk. The one that would cause you not to be Muslim. It is a hidden. Khafi means hidden. Hidden form of shirk. It's the higher levels of faith that we're trying to acquire and attain. Because even when we conceptually say that we believe God is the only one that provides us sustenance, that is only saying that. It's not really necessarily believing it. If somebody really believed that, then they would never do anything that is haram in order to gain a single penny, even. Not even a single penny. Because you believe it comes from God. He's the one that provides. This guy says, do this and I'll give you this amount. No, you're not the one that provides anything for me. So, on one end of the spectrum, one of the wrong views of tawheed is to actually believe in or accept subconsciously that there are other beings, other persons, other people. There are people, individuals, objects even, that are capable of changing what happens to me. Other than God. And there's an emphasis on that. Other than God. Min dunillah. The verses of the Holy Quran say. Min dunillah. Other than God, something else. Which we'll hopefully touch on what exactly that means. On the other end of the spectrum, the other view, the other wrong view of tawheed is what theologians say is nafyul asbab. Denying there's anything that has any form of causality with regards to anything in this universe. I'll give you, or I'll demonstrate that with an example. Fire burns, right? It can severely burn as well, right? Inshallah, you don't go through that experience, or at least a severe one. Fire burns, right? According to this view, actually, fire doesn't burn. God burns you. Okay. Fire has nothing to do with you burning. It's God 110%. Fire has nothing to do with it. If your heart beats and you're alive, your heart has nothing to do with you being alive. God gives you life. Your heart has nothing to do with it. Zero. Absolutely nothing. No causality. This notion that scientists say, no, your heart has something to do with you being alive. Your brain has something to do with you being alive. Your blood has something to do with you being alive. All that is baloney. That's because they're kafir. All right? In reality, in actuality, that has nothing to do with you being alive. God is giving you life. He takes life away from you, whether you have a life or not. I can actually take somebody's heart out. If God wants them to live, they'll live. It's not the heart that gives them life. And it has nothing to do with it. This is important. This is another extreme view and a wrong view. Nafyul asbab. Nothing has any form of causality towards anything that has to do with me or anything else. It's not water that quenches my thirst, and it has nothing to do with my thirst being quenched. It's God that quenches the thirst. Prophet Ibrahim says, it's God that feeds me. It's God that quenches my thirst. That's the notion that we accept. This is the wrong view. Taking some of the words of the Holy Quran out of context, developing a narrow understanding of that, and presenting that as tawheed. Based on this understanding, very obviously, you can't go to anyone and ask him for anything. Because nobody else, nothing else has any effect on you whatsoever. It's only God that has any type of effect. In fact, according to this, even you have no effect. Even I have no effect. I'm not making decisions here. I'm a puppet. God is moving me around. Okay. This extreme view ends up here, where even I don't have any free will. I don't do anything. I don't make any decisions. And then they quote that verse, وَمَا تَشَاءُونَ إِلَّا أَن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ. You don't will anything. You don't make any decisions unless God makes that decision for you. So it's actually God that's doing everything. Not you, not me, not anyone, not anything. Earthquakes have zero impact. It's God that's killing people. Human beings don't have any causality towards anything they do. They don't make any decisions. It's all God that's doing everything. And this is one understanding of tawheed that is presented. A very narrow understanding of tawheed. But this is not tawheed. Both of them are incorrect understandings of tawheed. The understanding that believes that fire in and of itself can burn is against tawheed. And the notion that fire has nothing to do with me burning is also against tawheed. Neither of those two are correct understandings of tawheed. Tawheed is a very profound concept, a very profound belief and understanding of the universe, of the cosmos, that needs to be developed. If developed, everything will make sense. Going to the doctor makes sense. Dua for our cure makes sense. Going to the Imams for the cure of our illnesses makes sense. All of that is going to be put into one package, and it all conforms with tawheed. And it's all the meaning of tawheed. None of it is against tawheed, if understood correctly. Okay. So inshallah, we're going to do that. Our time has come to an end. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this blessed and holy month to provide us the ability to understand Him, understand His religion, understand tawheed, understand the Ahlul Bayt better and better, and further our understanding in that, inshaAllah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the ability to worship Him, to obey Him, to become of His closest servants in the company of the Holy Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt in this blessed month, inshaAllah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us make the best of the blessings that He provides in this month. We ask Him to give us the best of the blessings that He's given the best of His creation in this month. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the return of our Imam. We ask Him to make us His close and true companions. We ask Him to give us the ability to see our Imam. We ask Him to prolong the life of Him, protect all those helping the cause of Islam, all those putting their lives on the line to protect Islam and Muslims, especially our Maraja and especially our leader. We ask Him to grant all believers health and security, relieve all of them of the hardships that they're facing, especially the believers in Yemen, in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, anywhere in the world that believers are struggling because of their faith. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to relieve them and grant them victory, inshaAllah. Bin Nabiya wa alih, rahimallah man qara al-fatihata ma'a salawat.
MOMIN, we have like 5 minutes before the Azan Maghrib, so please get ready with your wudu.